But both those points really do match in on that ESF discussion. But with drawing, next to watercolour, an incredibly unforgiving medium. But you've chosen drawing, you've chosen graphite, these hard, multi-layered marking to get your very crystalline, almost, they're semi-Baroque in a way. I mean, with all of the patterning and everything running under there, they're quite ornate, but then black and white, or grey and silver. There's so maybe you can talk about those ideas of for instance, the black and white versus colouring as an undercurrent, or the fine detailed mark to get this across. I note things like on the exposed leg, it looks like, I can't quite tell if it's a damage from ballet, and the marks that are up there are the laces that have come up there, as if this poor bloke's been forced to do points for the last 5 years, or whether those are actually marks of mutilation.
No.
So,
from the thorns.
Oh!
In the picture, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Too literal.
I think I chose drawing. So I started off with a lot of watercolour and acrylic. And while I like colour, I think the black and white, there's a magic in it. And I think in the process of drawing, I found it as a process of like magic. It's like release, and you're placing your intent, I suppose, onto the page. So with each physical mark you're placing your idea as well. That's just the way I feel about it when I draw.
Okay, so it really is a sort of a control issue.
Yeah, and I'm a perfectionist, and I find paint's too wily for me.
Okay, well it did bring to mind just a couple of other thoughts. Many years ago, I went to an exhibition of Mike Parr's. Is everyone aware of Mike Parr, the Australian artist? Or a lot of you are. So, predominant artist, basically he's been running a self-portrait project since about 1973. Born with one arm, so a lot of it deals with his sense of identity. But I went to a show where he had about 40 A4 self-portraits that he'd drawn over the passage of a couple of months, just running around, and they were really quite wild and expressive. But right in the middle was an incredibly composed one, really articulated and you could see what it was. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, it's funny you picked that one out. Of course, that was actually what I was drawing in the waiting room as my wife was undergoing a mastectomy. And what I recognised was that the world was going chaotic around me. I needed some place where I could be in control. So that's why it was so controlled. And I think also the people who classified as outsider artists, those who might have some sort of psychological disorder. And again, you'll find they're constantly drawing because it's on the page they can control these darker outside thoughts. Does any of that sort of sensibility come in?
Maybe with this work here in this show.
Well, because they are very. I'm not using S&M. I'm thinking of another word that doesn't have the eroticism about it. But they are works that involve pain, discomfort.
Yeah. I don't know how to respond to your question.
You can think about it for a minute. We can go on and come back.
No, I don't. So I think this work here is, yes, to respond to the question you're asking. It is having a controlled space within a time of discomfort, I suppose. But my work beyond here, I think I am very controlled with the work that I do and make such fine work is because I'm trying to construct a particular story or identity. So I think it's probably just my personal way of being able to do that. And I don't think I know how to access that with a more abstract process.
Lovely. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't...
No, because
so much insight.
I'm rambling, but trying to get sort of things in there. And thank you. And the reason I've left you to the end in this particular conversation is naturally you're the one who's pushing all sorts of boundaries. You're not using any traditional media. Even your photography, I wouldn't say you're using traditionally or casting. But you've made a deliberate decision to use those in this discourse of what is one of these bubbling different ways of depicting things. So maybe you can talk about some of the choices and why you've chosen some of the medium.
Yeah, that's another colour question. Only because I was looking something up, but it's Jana or Hansa who does the automated collage work that throws it on the ground. Just got nervous and just forgotten to do. So it was sort of automatic. So there's this in art history, this period where there was automatic drawing, where the subconscious takes over and there is collage work, and so you're sort of leaving it to the laws of chance. And I actually am a drawer, which is sort of weird looking at my work. But so I have been drawing, and these shadow figures come from sort of more automated drawing. So nothing that is controlled, something that is out of control. And so for the shadow figures, they are rich in, they might look simple, but I've done about 100 leading up to that point, over many, many years. And yeah, just allowing the subconscious to come through. And yeah, so I guess, yeah.
And your decision then to transfer them into things like, is it resin or acrylic?
That's acrylic.
Acrylic, yeah. And then these, two reflective works. They're not expected medium for such a thing, dealing with shadows, dealing with...
No, because they're not a literal shadow. So.
And also here, I must mention, I was lucky enough to see Holly's show. I think you were saying was the Master Show VCA, and it was about 18 months, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And these figures or versions of these figures were actually painted directly onto the wall.
Yes.
And they loomed across this big room, and then you only had a selection of their photos playing off against it, and it really did seem as though you had these intense focus moments with the photos, and then look back and there were these figures just hovering around.
Yeah, so I did the figures sort of painted on the wall as installation. So for this exhibition I was trying to work out how do I make this something that I'm just not painting everywhere. And also, so they become more like cave paintings because there's a sense of being tribal, and they're just like sort of a stamp that's sort of seeping out of your unconscious into your conscious. So I've also, there's some readings that say that the shadow is also a net that captures the discarded parts of yourself that you're leaving behind as you're going through adolescence and growing up and everything. So I think there's this awesome quality of it being a net as well. So then I was translating it to different materials, and I wanted, at the VCA they were so like, this is not painting. So I'm like, I will not paint. I promise. So I'm not going to as yet paint. But I absolutely love painting, and I really wasn't good enough.
No, you just didn't fit their paradigm.
Possibly. So, but I'm exploring the boundaries of a concept, sort of the concept and how the material serves the concept. And if you think of, I'll get to the coloured photographs in a minute, but if you think of the shadow, a lot of reading says, and it comes to, so in tribal culture, so Balinese cultures or the Kukeri, I was really into the Kukeri rituals in Bulgaria where they have these rituals where they put on masks and they celebrate and they scream and they get violent. But we don't do all that in this culture because we're so scared of that side of ourselves, but it comes out in road rage and all these other sort of suppressed ways. But these sort of ancient tribes had a place for these sort of darker elements of ourselves. And then as you'll sort of see with the Balinese, the sweetest people ever, or if you know a heavy metal musician, they are
the drummers are usually pussycats.
They're just pussycats. So they've got a space for it to all come out. And so that's where the gold element comes in, because there's this gold, there's this gift, there's this power that comes out of the shadow, these darker elements of yourself that you might not be that comfortable with, and that's why I've used this gold material. But my background...
Interestingly too, because even just looking at it now, don't move, this gentleman with the hat, we can see the reflection in the back, which looks like a shadow within the shadow within the shadow. So.
That's right, and you can't look at the works without seeing yourself, so it's about being brave enough to look at yourself. We're talking about what shadow you project onto others, what shadow is yours, and what's obviously the collective shadow. So we have to war.
Okay, because another thing we did talk about earlier, it's this notion that I suppose if you look at the history, particularly of Well, in Greek times with their gods were allowed to have human flaws, and that's what made them so intriguing, because they were allowed to fall from Olympus and get back up, and demigods, etc. And you could argue through history, for every image of the pure Madonna, there is the image of the other. Now, I mentioned Sheena Nagib, who's the Irish bird spirit, who's a very ferocious bird spirit. And you mentioned someone else in that.
Lilith and Medusa.
Yeah, Lilith, yes, exactly, all of these ones. So they're like a constant undercurrent that goes through those, but you've chosen to manifest those. Yet they're beautiful, like the Madonna. Or,
well, that's what I mean. It's
sorry, I'll take that back. I don't think the Madonna's beautiful. Madonna is, not the Madonna.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other talk.
Yes, I know. But it does sort of bounce out.
Feminist discussion about, the fact that we picked the sort of the virgin and the prostitute to be our feminist sort of, like our accepted
and God's
icons. Yeah, but there's a whole range that then has rage, collective rage, and a lot of things. So that brings me to the photographs at the front. That sort of, it's more animalistic. It's to do with masks and the masks that we have in the world, and we show in the world, and that in our Western culture we don't necessarily accept, or we don't empower ourselves to connect with what shamanism did. I was really into Carlos Castaneda. Has anyone read those books? Carlos Castaneda. Don Juan. About shamanism, and not necessarily taking peyote, but connecting with nature and empowering us instead of compressing us. So we go, great, I'm going to do ecstatic dance, connect to spirit guides. I'm not alone. I can connect to my animal spirit. I can connect to other spirits. And there was this, without taking too much time, but there was this fascinating thing about Marie Antoinette, where she wanted to, when she first arrived, I read this in a book, so I'm just sort of paraphrasing. When she first arrived as queen, she said, "Can I milk the cows?" And they went, "Oh, okay, sure." So they arranged it for her and everything. And she had an instinct that she wanted to connect to nature, and she wanted to be grounded. She wanted to get dirty. And then when it came to milking the cows, she went, "Oh, no," because she just went, "Oh, that's a bit gross."
As if the idea was compelling, but once confronted with the idea,
But I guess I was saying in this book that if she'd done it, she wouldn't have lost her head. So she would have connected to her animal self, her real self, her natural self. And that's what some of those books are.
All right. Now, intriguingly with that too, when you think of that, you have immersed yourself within the undercurrent. Oh, thank you. Whereas, dare I say, you're still looking at the undercurrent. You're slightly getting under it by gently participating in this world, but questioning at the same time. And you, in a way, are processing the undercurrents by doing your drawing and manifesting away. Does any of you, just if one of you wanted to maybe talk more of how that sort of idea corresponds or not with your work?
I see Martin's as exposing the shadow, because it's someone's private world, and it's not what you show to people, so it's not your mask. So I see it as really showing some of the undercurrent. Because it's not what they want to present. They never know what they're doing.
Well, except they've left the lights up.
Yes.
Yeah, the lights up.
Okay. Well, look, as a general discussion, maybe we'll talk about one more thing before I throw it open to the floor. Is that darkness is, whenever you think of undercurrent, I would argue that a lot of people think first of dark things, fearful things, and things on the other. And many years ago, I did do some immersive things into darkness, and two key points for me came out of it. Number one is, darkness was one of the plagues in the Bible. Darkness was visited upon the people as punishment. It wasn't something to be celebrated, it was punishment. And the second thing is, and I can't remember who the author was, but someone identified about 10 years ago that we now live in an age where any bookshop you go to, memoirs dealing with personal pain and trauma, or true crime, preferably the most forensic and offensive, bucket loads of shelves. It's like a mini porn industry of pain, crime, and dark belief. And these definitely run through a lot of our streams of those. It's almost like through disembodied, which ties in very much the selfie aspect, or the use of viewing things through media like that, would maybe, we'll say, Michael, but yes, if you want to talk about maybe, because you are using the technology, is it for you a dark form of manifesting in the world?
I mean, I think there's good and bad in it, but I'm sort of, it's not all bad, but I'm sort of more interested in some of the more negative aspects of it, and that kind of loop that people go on that's sort of ultimately quite unsatisfying. And I'm sort of just, I think, trying to step back and understand the motivation for the behaviours. And I think it sounds a bit macabre, but I have this kind of theory that a lot of that compulsion to want to record the minutiae of your life is sort of a fear of death that I think is kind of innate in a lot of people, most people, and wanting to kind of show everyone that I was alive and I mattered. And so there's kind of something quite dark simmering beneath that obsession with curating yourself to the world, which fascinates me. That's just I think it's, and it's not, again, it's not judgmental because I engage in that too, but I think I step back and say, why? And I think it is that kind of fear of like disappearing without a trace.
Well, talking disappearing without a trace, I mean, you use darkness as a friend, as a veil, as something from which within you can find these pinpricks of life.
Yes, yeah. And that's probably the most important aspect of the painting, the darkness, because that permits the light, these scenes to present themselves.
Okay. All right, well, look, we are going to the end, so maybe if I can throw it to the floor. Has anyone got, and please, can we, unlike me, can we have questions, not rambling anecdotes? Certainly that would help. Has anyone got something they'd like to offer or query? Claire, Mel, anyone from the floor?
I think you did a wonderful job. I'm
No,
just
that's-
processing everything that was said. It's a lot to take in, but it really brings out what we had in mind for the exhibition, but also an undercurrent behind all of these artists' work. We see a very, visual, very sort of affronting image, and it's nice to be able to get underneath that and actually work out the little themes and the little stories behind all the work. So
Okay.
I think it's perfect.
Thank you. Well, in that case, I do know there is one more question, so we might end off on this one. And it's from Holly. To Ryan.
Hi, Holly.
Hi, Ryan. I would like to know what your spiders mean for you, because Louise Bourgeois' spiders are about maybe being maternal, and I'm intrigued as to what they mean for you.
So when I first drew the spider in this work here, I don't know why I had identified to draw the spider until the model that I drew suggested that maybe it's this, we called it the dagger, and it's something you can use to inflict pain, but the fact that it's kind of just resting in the hands, it's not used, but it's still there. So that thought of using it's kind of marked your skin, and you can, like, it's that tangible feeling. Like if you felt a spider crawl over you, kind of feel its legs. And while you haven't used it, that it's still there. Do you know what I mean? It's that undercurrent of what you're thinking about, and it's not positive, but it still remains with you in some way.
But the daddy long lengths, it's funny, even though that's probably the most venomous one over there, it looks cuter. We've all got a sensation of daddy long lengths, I suppose.
I don't know why I included the daddy long legs, to be honest. I don't have a reason
It's
for it. Yeah.
But I can
I
feel
was
that. I can absolutely feel that. Yeah. All right. Well, on a lovely spidery note. Sorry, what was that?
Oh no, it's okay. No, like, don't.
All right. Well, look. thank you very much for attending, and if I could please just have a round of applause for the